Welcome to Sistah's Place Inspiration and Entertainment Show interviews with authors, celebs, and much more with hostesses Latrice Carter and Selena Haskins.
It's me, Latrice Carter, and in my next author spotlight feature, I sit down with author, blogger, editor, and speaker, Chandra Sparks Splond. She talks about her latest book as well as gives some tips for new authors as well as seasoned authors. So sit back and enjoy my interview with Chandra Sparks Splond.
Chandra, welcome to Sistah's Place podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Latrice.
Oh, you are so welcome. So welcome. It is a pleasure to have you on the show. So let's get started. Tell our audience who Chandra Sparks Splond is.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Chandra Sparks Splond. I'm an author, blogger, editor, and speaker. I have published 17 books. I've been blogging for about 5 years, and I have been editing for almost 25 years. My editing clients include aspiring and established authors, including a few New York Times, USA Today, and Essence bestselling authors. As far as my books are concerned, I write mainly for teens and tweens. So from about the ages of 9 up until about the ages of 18. I have a few books that kind of vary from that, but that's typically my core audience. As far as blogging, I have 2 blogs. My personal blog is found on my website, chandrasparkssplond.com. And then my book blog is blackfictionaddiction.com, where we talk about Black books and we celebrate the authors who create them. So that's me in a nutshell. All those are just my titles. The titles that mean the most to me are being a child of God, a wife, and a mom. So that's me in a nutshell.
All right. A woman with many hats. That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Your latest novel release is Speak. What is this story about?
Speak is a story of 15-year-old. Can you hear me? Okay. Speak is a story of 15-year-old who has zero desire to follow in the footsteps of his famous father. Thanks to the pandemic, they've been stuck in the house together for months, and Kobe has just reached the point where he's had enough. And it seems the only way he'll get any peace is if he finds a way to speak up for himself. So what starts out as a simple idea to get away from his dad and show some independence ends up in Kobe's life changing in ways that he never could have imagined. So for Kobe, this summer becomes the time when he actually finds his voice and learns to speak.
Okay. So what was the inspiration behind the title, Speak?
I really just wanted to, no pun intended, speak to about the importance of finding your voice and learning to speak up for yourself. Being a teenager is not easy. I tell my daughter now, my daughter will be 16 in a couple of weeks, and I tell her now, like, you couldn't pay me to go back to being a teenager, because it's just so much going on. You're trying to figure out who you are, you're trying to figure out who other people are and how you fit in, you're trying to find yourself and your voice. So I just thought it was important to send a message to kids and for them to learn that it's okay for them to speak up for them, not just themselves, but for those around them and for the injustices they see going on in our world. It's okay for them to have a voice.
Absolutely. And that brings us right into our next question. Is there a particular message in Speak that you want all the readers to be able to walk away with after reading Speak?
I think the most important message is to find the courage to actually speak. And sometimes, you have to do that even when there are butterflies doing backflips in your belly, meaning that, sometimes you'll be afraid to speak up, but you still need to find your voice and speak up for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because if you don't speak up for yourself, people have a tendency to walk all over you.
Yes, they really do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there a relation or correlation to speak with what you have seen going on today with the young people, with all the protesting and the police brutality, how the young people are feeling, because they're speaking out their voices.
Yeah, they are speaking up for themselves. I think, if you look to the past, our kids have kind of always spoken up and led us in a way. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, which tends to be considered like the heart of the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many protests back then where young kids were involved. And the same is going on today with all the protests you're seeing around the country and everything. There are kids who are involved in speaking up and, standing up for not just themselves, but for their fellow man. So, that's evident in my story. And I purposely did that because I wanted my story to reflect the reality of what's going on today.
Okay, very good, very good. I think I'm gonna have to get that for my nieces and nephews. I think it'll be really good for them to read, speak. So, Christmas gifts.
Always great gifts. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I keep telling them reading is fundamental.
It really is. Yeah.
It really is. Yes, it is. So after visiting your website, I see some other recent novels like Get It Together and Pass It On. What inspired those two novels?
For Get It Together, it's funny, I actually wrote that book years ago. When I say years, I think I wrote it like at least 7 years ago.
Okay.
But I really just wanted to explore friendships and the fact that friendships come in so many different forms. As teenagers, I think a lot of times when you think about friendships, you think about your peers, so kids around your own age. But in this story, the friendship is actually between there are some friendships between the main character and, kids her age. But the main character's name is Alexis. But the main friendship is between Alexis and this older woman that she ends up meeting, who not only becomes her friend, but becomes her mentor as well. Okay. So I just want to explore friendships and the fact that, you need to be really careful when you just call a person your friend, because everyone is not your friend.
That is very true.
Yeah, so I really just wanted to explore that in a safe space for teens. A lot of times with all my books, there's always going to be some kind of lesson. And a lot of times what kids are reading, it might be, stuff that their parents have told them, but seeing it in a book and seeing, a book peer go through it is a little more palatable than having your mama tell you, well, you can't call everybody your friend. Mm-hmm. So I really just try and explore those kind of issues. Okay. That, they're experiencing in whatever way. As far as Pass It On, that's another book that I wrote a while back. It's one of my books for adults, and I really just wanted to explore the way a lot of times in life we start out having all these dreams, and for whatever reason we get off course from these dreams. So with Pass It On, I wanted to explore what happens. The main character's name is Reese. She gets pregnant her senior year of high school. And she had all these dreams about, she wanted to work in journalism and do all these things. But as a result of getting pregnant, her dreams got derailed. So now she's had this baby and she's reached the point where, she wants to pass on the gift of a better life to her daughter. She's having to rethink how she does that after leaving a bad relationship. So again, there are real life lessons that people can learn from reading that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do you have a favorite character that you love in all three novels that we mentioned?
I think I love all of the characters. I mean, there's something about them that appeals to me on different levels. I think for me, I probably, of the three books we've discussed, the one I relate to the most is probably Reese. Um, Not that I got pregnant in high school, but I was a single parent for about 5 years. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the struggle is very real being a single mom. So, a lot of the stuff that I deal with in a book, some of that stuff actually happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's one scene in there where she's in the grocery store, like trying to pay for stuff, and she hers happens as a result of her winning like some contest. So she has this money, but with the money, she's supposed to do something for somebody else. But the reality is like she needs food to feed her baby. So she's about to use the money for that, feeling a lot of guilt about it. And, ends up not doing it. And the struggle is very real for that. I just remember being a single mom. I'm like, well, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to take care of my baby. So there was some forms of my life like in that scene and throughout the book. So that's probably who I relate to the most out of all the books that we discussed.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds very good. I'm a single mom too, so hey, yeah, I understand.
Blessed. I mean, I remarried, so I'm in a different place now. But I just hats off to single moms. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. So God bless you.
Thank you. But I was taught to press forward and make the life that I always wanted, to not give up on my dreams. So, I'm always made sure I install that in my daughter. So, but we press forward and, no regrets. I love her to death. I always tell people my dreams got deferred. But I got back on path.
And that's what happened to me. My daughter is actually the reason that I finally started writing, that I decided to live my dreams, because I had wanted to write books since I was 14 years old.
Oh, wow.
As I got ready to go off to college, when my mom asked me what I wanted to do with my life, I told her I wanted to write books. And she told me that, authors didn't make any money. She was to fall back on. So I ended up majoring in journalism because that was the closest I could get to writing. Found that I didn't like journalism because the writing was too structured for me.
Mm-hmm.
Senior year of college, I ended up taking a class in copy editing. And I found that not only did I like copy editing, like I loved copy editing. I had been correcting people in their papers and all that. I didn't know that there was a career. There was a name for it. So class, I'm like, you mean I can like correct people and get paid for it? So I fell in love with that. And I ended up, after I graduated from college, I got offered a job in New York as a copy editor, and I moved there for a training program, a 2-year training program. So I spent, the beginning of my career in copy editing and various forms of editing. But it wasn't until 2004, after I had my daughter, where I'm like, you know what? I always said that I wanted to write books. And, how can I tell my daughter that her dreams can come true if I didn't work for my dreams? So I made the decision then to, to start writing books. So I would get up every morning. I challenged myself to write a book before my daughter turned a year old. So I would get up every morning and write. And, as a mom, you real sleep deprived. So looking back on it, I don't know how I did it, by the grace of God. So I finished the first manuscript a month after her first birthday. And once I did that, I challenged myself to land a book deal before she turned 2. And I received the offer for my book, Spin It Like That, 2 months after her second birthday. And I guess the rest, as they say, is history. She'll be 16 this month. So, my writing career is all she's ever known. But she's absolutely the reason that I started, and that I continue to do it, to show her that her dreams can come true.
That is beautiful. Oh my God, that is beautiful. I love that. I love that. You inspire me while I'm sitting here like, okay, I need to finish my book. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That is beautiful. Finding time. That's really big. That's really hard when you're a single parent because that's when your child is in multiple activities. You're
Yes.
trying to balance.
And what I found, as she's grown up, because we absolutely have the multiple activities and stuff. And I actually don't write now as consistently as I used to when she was younger, but I am a strong believer in doing stuff in 15-minute increments. Because if I
Okay.
say, you know what, I need to write today, I need to block out an hour to write, that's really not going to happen. But if I say 15 minutes, like, you can do something in 15 minutes. So break it down, like, for example, with my blog, I blog 3 days a week. So I do it in 15-minute increments, though. So at one point, like, I'll decide, I'll sit down and kind of, do my editorial calendar and decide what I'm going to do for a month. At another time, I'll maybe write one story within that 15-minute time period. At another time, I'll design the image to go with it. So again, and a lot of times what I'll find is that 15 minutes kind of expands, but just thinking about 15 minutes, it's not as intimidating as doing a longer period of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So being an author and an editor yourself, what advice can you offer new authors?
I think the biggest thing is to read. I meet so many people who say they want to write a book, or they talk about writing a book, and then they admit, well, I really don't read anything. You have to read. The best writers are readers. And a lot of times, you're not reading. You read to find out what you do and what you don't want to do in books. There's so many books I read that I thoroughly enjoy, and I'm like, oh, I like the way she turned that phrase, or I like the way she did this, or she did that. On the flip side, a lot of times I read and I might say, well, you know what, that was terrible. Like, what lesson is it I want to learn from this? So you can learn something from whatever you read. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't have time to sit down and read a full-length book or do this, that, and other. I would say 98% of my reading now takes place because I listen to audiobooks. And, I do that while I'm driving somewhere. I do that while I'm, just sitting around cleaning up or doing whatever the case may be. So that's still a way to get reading in. And since I made the decision to start listening to audiobooks, when I tell you, Latrice, like, the amount of reading I've done has skyrocketed. I started tracking the number of books I read a couple of years ago. I was determined that I was going to start reading more. So I went from maybe reading for pleasure, because as an editor, clearly I edit a lot of books, so I read, but I don't count that as reading. That's work. So, I went from reading maybe a book a month, maybe that much, for pleasure. Right now, I think I probably listen to maybe about 90 books for the year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's really good.
Yeah, so just listening to audiobooks has absolutely changed my life. And thanks to the libraries, you can do it for free. If all you need is a library card, because most of the libraries have, I know here in Birmingham, we have Hoopla, we have, I think it's called Libby now. It used to be called Overdrive. Those are 2 free services you can get from the library, where you can check out audiobooks through an app on your phone. And then, of course, you have the paid ones like Scribd and Audible, and I think there's one called Audiobooks. So there are just so many different options where you can use those to read. And those services also offer ebooks. So, those are just things to consider if you're trying to figure out how to get more reading done. Those are ways you can do it. But back to your question, in terms of advice I'd offer to aspiring authors is 100% read. And the other thing is to learn your craft. I mean, I see a lot of people, I get a lot of people who submit stuff to me for consideration for me to edit their projects. And it's clear that they haven't learned their craft. So you have to take classes, you have to, you have to do things to learn the craft of writing. Once you know the rules of writing, then you can break the rules. You can't break the rules without knowing what the rules are.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. What advice can you offer to the youth who desire to write?
Again, read. Reading is so important. I encounter a lot of kids who don't like to read. Reading is very important. As far as youth is concerned, and adults too, I have this theory that the reason our youth don't like to read is because they haven't found books that they can relate to. So, they're books, but when I say reading, I'm not just talking about books. I mean, there are other things that count as reading. You have blogs, you have, stuff online, articles and stuff. All of that counts as reading. Like to play video games, the video game code books and magazines and all that stuff. All that counts as reading. So that's very important. Learning skills as a writer. The papers your teacher has you write, they may not be the kind of writing that you like to do, but you're still learning about the structure of a story. Stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end, just like your papers do. So those skills are very important to learn. If there are writers that you like, follow them on social media or whatever the case may be, so that you can you find out more about them as a writer and as a person. All those things kind of play into you writing books.
Absolutely, sure does. So, who inspires and influences your writing?
Who inspires and influences my writing? Well, we already talked about my why as far as my writing is concerned. My main motivation is absolutely my daughter. In terms of, I want her to see that her dreams can come true. My parents were a huge influence. They both passed away now. But, I want to write stuff that's going to make my parents proud of me, that I'm not going to be embarrassed to walk into the church, and be like, oh, she wrote that. So, so those things are very important to me. As far as authors who are an influence, I love James Patterson, the fact that he is so prolific, and he tells good stories. So I enjoy his books. I enjoy Kimberly Lawson Roby's books, Michelle Stimpson, Kim Cash Tate, Jacqueline Thomas, Vanessa Davis Griggs. Those are our people who, I really enjoy their stories. So I've read most, if not all, of what a lot of them have written. Just because I enjoy the stories as a reader and as a writer, the way that they spin them, that they can put words and stuff together, all that stuff is really cool to me.
Absolutely. You named some of my favorites as well. I'm actually taking Jim Patterson's writing class.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that the master class?
Yes. Yep. Yes. He's good. He's really good. A lot of notes.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sure. I've just, I've seen different interviews and stuff that he's done over the years, and he always shares really good information. So yeah, again, and, so people who are like, well, I don't have the money to invest in those classes. There's so much information you can find for free online.
Yes.
And, it's really obvious to me, like when people contact me, you can tell when people have and have not done their homework. Some stuff is just a simple Google search. So Google is your friend. Asking questions is fine, but you shouldn't look to me to give you all the answers for everything. There's some stuff that you need to search out for yourself.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Um, can you let authors, can you let our authors listening know about your editorial services that you offer? Because I saw that you do offer that service. Um, I always get emails from those like, can you recommend an editor? And what do they do? And I'm like, okay, I'm interviewing one today, so make sure you tune in.
Yeah, well, I offer a few different services, mainly line editing and copy editing, and I do developmental editing too. I don't advertise it on the site as much because it's kind of baked into the other stuff I do.
Mhm.
So, you know, I've been trained, well, I've worked professionally as a copy editor and um, as an editor, acquiring and editing books. So as far as copy editing is concerned, that looks at a story's grammar, spelling, and punctuation. So making sure that words are spelled correctly, making sure, that the right tenses and stuff are used. Did you put, when you say, use a quote, I went to this, Joe is coming over, she said, making sure you have the commas and the quotation marks and all that stuff in the right place. So that's kind of what copy editing looks at. Line editing is where you're going through line by line, looking at the story, you know, looking at whatever changes need to be made. Developmental is kind of looking at the overall story, like, how are these characters shaping up? How's this story put together? What's the pacing? All that different kind of stuff goes into those three things. So those are the main things that I do. For people who are looking for an editor, it's real easy for me to say, well, I've worked for these people and I've worked for these publishers and done this, that, and the other. But that really doesn't mean anything until you see what I'll do for your project.
Mm-hmm.
So I offer everybody a free sample edit on 5 consecutive double space pages from their manuscript. If they're interested in that, then they can contact me at editing@chandrasparksplond.com, and submit those 5 double space pages. And like I said, I'll do the free sample edit. If I think we'll be a good fit to work together, I'll send you back the edited pages as well as the price quote, so you'll know what the project is. If you're interested, then we can move forward. It's a two-way street. If I don't think I can help your project, then I'm not gonna, take it on. I don't, because editing is an investment. It is. So I don't believe in wasting people's money. If I don't feel like I can help you, then I'm not gonna take your project. So
Absolutely. Well, you have worked with some of the best in publishing. What are 3 key areas that you see authors make most mistakes?
The biggest one is probably not hiring a professional editor, especially people who are thinking about going the traditional publishing route, and they're like, well, I'll just let the publishers handle that. But the problem with that is, you're submitting your work and there are 20 other people who also submitted their work. As an editor, if I'm working for a publishing house, with all that we have going on at publishing houses, I'm looking for a project that's not gonna be a lot of work, for lack of a better term. So if there are 20 projects that come in, let's say there are 3 of them that I just absolutely love, but one of them has actually been professionally edited, which means that I'm gonna have to do less work. That's probably the project that I'm gonna go with.
Mm-hmm.
So that editing is very important. If you're self-publishing, the same thing holds true. I think we've all picked up books where we're like, even people who aren't trained will pick up the book and be like, wow, these typos in the book, or just looking at it, giving it the side eye because on page 15, the guy had brown eyes, and then on page 25, all of a sudden his eyes are green. All stuff that's called in editing. So it's important that you have somebody with professional knowledge do that. A lot of times people will have, oh, well, my best friend majored in English, or, well, I can do it myself because I majored. No. The problem with you doing it yourself is that you become too close to your work. So you start seeing stuff that's not there. You see what
That's
you
right.
Okay. So that's why it's important that you have, a set of eyes, a fresh set of eyes on your work. So that's very important. Another big thing that I see people doing is, especially people who are self-publishing, is not thinking that not understanding that their book has to compete with books that are being put out by big publishing houses. So, my goal as a self-published author is for you not to know that I'm a self-published author. So when you look at my book, I want you to think that it comes from one of the big publishers in terms of cover design. A lot of times people may design the covers themselves. If you're not a graphic designer, that's probably coming across on the cover. And people judge books by covers. So that's something to think about. So you have the cover design that you need to make sure is done professionally. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Let me see the question again. So you have the mistake of not getting it professionally edited. What, Latrice, I just so lost my train.
No worries. The three biggest mistakes that you see authors make. And I know you said not getting it professionally edited, and then not cover design is the second one.
Well, what I was saying was not competing with the mainstream publishers.
Okay.
So compete with them on all levels. So that includes the cover design, that includes the typesetting, that includes the editing. They're going to have professionals doing all those things. So you need to have professionals doing all those things too. So, a lot of people say, well, I really don't have the money to do all that. I understand. I get that. I've been there. I can't tell you the number of times that I've bartered services or found a more inexpensive way to do stuff and still have it be high quality. So for example, with my covers, I get my covers designed through Fiverr, Fiverr.com. At most, I know I pay less than $100 for the images and the cover designs. That's something that most people can afford to do. Again, with editing and all that stuff, that's stuff that you can barter services for if you know of people. If you know of people who are just starting out who want to be, I know plenty of people who say they want to be editors, but they need experience. So maybe they're charging less, or maybe they're willing to barter the service, or whatever the case may be. So those are some ways that you can cut costs without cutting quality.
Absolutely.
And then the last thing, as far as mistakes being made, is to not promote your work. I mean, a lot of people think that once you put the book out there, that's it. Like everybody's just going to come to you. But it's a constant process. I mean, you have to always, I don't want to say beat people over the heads with it, but you really do.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm talking to myself too, because I don't find that easy to do. Like, I feel like, I know for me, seeing people talk about this stuff can tend to get annoying. So there's a really fine balance in how to promote your work without it being annoying. But you have to let people can't buy about what they don't know about, but they also need to know you. So if all they ever see of you is buy my book, that'll be a turnoff. But if they get to know other sides of you, they may get to know you for 6 months or whatever through social media before they even consider buying your book. So those things are important.
Absolutely. It is hard to promote yourself, but it's something that we have to do. I had to come out of that shell myself.
And again, it's something that I still have to work at. It's not, my natural default to talk about myself or my books. I used to think there was a time, when a book came out, like I just mentioned it the day it came out and didn't say anything else about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, I posted it on social media, and maybe 10% of the people who follow me on social media may have seen that post.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things to think about. You never know. Like I have people now. I put up something about a book that I did the other day. Somebody was like, "Oh, I didn't know you had that book out. The book came out 3 years ago." So there's gonna always be somebody. And again, it's not like I try not to beat people over my head. I made a promise to myself that starting this year, I would talk about at least one of my books a few times a week. So
Mm-hmm.
Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, I'll post something about my books. Could I be doing something every day? Yeah. But I mean, I have to work up to that. Like the 3 days a week, I'm fine with for now.
Right. Absolutely.
But promoting is a constant process. And it's not always fun or easy, but it's something that has to be done, especially now with social media and everything. It's just something that you have to do. Even with a traditional deal, traditional publishers, they may promote it heavily for the first month, and then what happens after that?
Stop
You know?
promoting.
Yeah. So
Absolutely. And that brings us into our next question.
okay.
What are your thoughts on self-publishing versus traditional publishing? Because there are a lot of indie authors out there that I've seen over the last 3 years. And would you say self-publishing is the direction to go? Or is it, you can do self-publishing while you're trying to get a traditional publishing deal?
I've been traditionally published through Harlequin Books. They did my first 3 books,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been self-published for the rest of my books. A lot of that came about as a result of the market changing after my 3rd book came out. So while I called myself waiting to get another traditional deal, I was like, well, I'll just self-publish in the meantime. And here we are, 17 doing it. So I think, first of all, I'm a huge fan of indie or self-published authors, and not only because I am one, but because I know the work that goes into doing that. So I promote indie authors all the time because I don't think they get enough credit for what they do. I think there's nothing wrong with being a hybrid author. I know plenty of authors who do both traditional and self-publishing. And for traditional, just so you're clear on what we're talking about, traditional publishers are publishers who are going to offer you in advance. You're not going to pay them any money to publish your book. Okay. So I hear a lot of people say, well, oh yeah, I have a traditional deal. I paid such and such company this money and then they're giving me out. That's not a traditional deal. So you're going to get in advance and then you're going to get royalties based on your book. So those are traditional deals. There's nothing wrong with wanting to do both. Both have their pros and cons. With a traditional deal, the biggest pro for me is the distribution. So you're going to get your book in places like Walmart,
Mm-hmm.
So in all the independent books, or the black bookstores and the independent stores that exist. You have better access to those kind of places. You have access to the big stores, Barnes and Noble and Books A Million, those kind of stores. So those are the biggest pros to traditional publishing to me. As far as the cons are concerned, publishing is a business. So they're in it to make money.
Mm-hmm.
So for a lot of people, if you think about it, like let's say you decide you want to go the traditional route. First of all, with most of the traditional publishers, you're going to need an agent to submit your work. So that in and of itself is a process. So let's say you've done what you need to do, you've secured an agent. If the agent submits your book to a publisher and you get an offer, realistically, let's say you got an offer today, your book is not going to be out at the earliest until probably a year from now, maybe even 2 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
With self-publishing, if your book is ready to go, it's been professionally edited and all that stuff is done, you can have your book out by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And it cuts out the middleman. I mean, you're getting a larger percentage of the money that you're going to get if you go the traditional route. You know, with both of them, you're going to have to hustle, meaning you're going to have to be out there promoting your work. But you just have to think about you and what your temperament is. Everybody doesn't have the temperament to self-publish.
Right.
Everybody doesn't have the temperament to deal with a traditional publisher, especially if their publisher is telling you that you have to change the title of your book, or you have to change the character names, or, you know, they give a cover to you that you don't like. And they're kind of like, well, okay, well, this is what we think is going to sell. You know, a lot of people don't want that. So those are all things to consider. Which route you go is really up to you. One is no better or no worse than the other as far as I'm concerned. You just have to figure out what's best for you.
Absolutely. So tell our listeners where they can get copies of your book.
So my books are available mainly on Amazon. You can read them for free through Kindle Unlimited. I've seen them like on the Walmart and Target website. So I guess through Amazon's distribution, they put them onto those sites. I've also seen them in our local library. So I think, you know, my libraries have been supporting me, which I really appreciate. But mainly you can find them online at Amazon. So they're available as ebooks and as paperbacks on that site.
Okay, awesome. And we'll definitely share your website link in our podcast group as well as on our social media as well.
Okay.
So tell our listeners how they can connect with you and follow you on social media. Okay,
well, you can find me online at chandrasparkssplond.com, and that's ChandraSparksSplond.com. On my website, you can find links to all my social media accounts, as well as excerpts for all my books, as well as links to both of my blogs, which the Book of Splond is actually housed on Chandra Sparks Splond, and Black Fiction Addiction, which is its own separate site. There's a link on my site, Chandra Sparks Splond, for that. But yeah, mainly I'm hanging out at chandrasparkssplond.com. And again, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. I try and stay active on all of them, but you can find links to all of those on my website.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chandra, for sitting down with me tonight to talk about your books. These will be perfect Christmas gifts, holiday gifts, birthday gifts for your kids. Everyone, make sure y'all pick up a copy, and I will be definitely staying connected with you, and I'll definitely send some referrals over to you for editorial service so they can, check you out and you can check them out. I do appreciate you, and thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Latrice. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
You too, and have a good evening and stay safe.
All right, you too.
All right, bye-bye.
Be sure to subscribe to Latrice's YouTube channel, Sistah's Place, and follow her on all social media.